Okay, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. I am Kat Climaco with Peaceful Presence Divorce Coaching. I am thrilled to have today's guest speakers on. Today is one event in the Lunch and Learn series where we have experts come in to generously donate their time and wisdom to help us navigate, heal, and move forward from the journey of divorce and family court. If you have questions today's a little bit different than our normal series. Corynne and Cameron are going to do sort of like a hands-on workshop style thing. So if you don't have one yet, grab your notebook. You're going to want to be writing things down as we go along. Feel free to put things in the chat as we're talking if you want to share some of your responses and your experiences as we go along. Great. And then if you have questions, wait to put them in the chat towards the end of the conversation when we get to the Q&A portion, because I don't want them to get lost in the chat. So just a quick reminder before we get started that today's event is being recorded for those who couldn't make it live. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. I am thrilled to introduce today's guests, Dr. Corynne and Dr. Cameron Kearns, a married couple who co-own New Horizon Psychotherapy together, which I think speaks highly to who they are as people and partners. Dr. Corynne is a licensed marriage and family therapist whose work sits at the intersection of neuroscience, attachment theory, and family systems. She supports individuals and couples navigating anxiety, depression, relational distress, and narcissistic abuse recovery. Her focus is on helping clients move out of reactive cycles and into a place of genuine self-agency and emotional safety. She's also a full-time faculty member at Vanguard University, where she trains graduate students in interpersonal neuroscience and clinical practice. So she's not only doing this work, she's shaping the next generation of clinicians who will be doing it as well. Dr. Cameron is also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he brings a holistic, strengths-based lens to his work with individuals, couples, families, and professionals. He's a DIR floor time certified play therapist with deep experience supporting neurodiverse children and their families, as well as adolescents navigating complex life challenges. His foundation in human development and relational well-being really comes through in how he approaches each person he works with. So before we dive in, I would love for the two of you to share a little bit about why you do this work and why you're so passionate about it, and maybe a little bit of context that'll help us understand what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So Cameron and I actually met in graduate school when we were both becoming marriage and family therapists. He and I just have similar passions. And at some point in the last year, we decided to go ahead and move forward in working together, which is the first time for us in our over 10-year marriage. So it's been really fun to have a practice together instead of working separately. And we both are just really passionate about working with families and bringing about the process of healing.
Yeah. So a little bit about my story. I became a therapist because therapy for me was really integral to my healing story. And so because it had been so helpful, I kind of wanted to give it a try. And at every step of the way going to school, it just continued to connect. And my wife is actually the only doctorate. I appreciate the faith, Kat. My doctorate is in process, but we also wanted to make the investment in her getting her doctorate because we want to spread this to as many people as we can. The things that we'll be talking about today. So.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. And I have to say to everyone who's joined us, Corynne and Cameron, when I spoke to them, understood the experience of narcissistic abuse, abusive co-parenting, and post-separation abuse better than any other professionals that I have ever spoken to before. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. Wow, they get it. So I am just so thrilled to have you here. So with that, let's dive in.
Yeah, thank you. So what we're going to talk about today is the ways in which we as survivors get stuck in patterns that don't serve us. and how we can move in practical ways to find freedom, that nervous system regulation, and everything I'll be talking about is coming from the restoration model by Dr. Hargrave. And you'll see a link to his book at the end. But it's all based on neuroscience, attachment, self-regulation. How do we move from a place of reactivity into a place of peace? And obviously, we can't wait for a partner to do that for us. We need to learn to do that for ourselves. So just as a little heads up, this isn't psychotherapy. So this is just educationally only and used to help educate and empower you. So like I said, we're going to talk about some key features of relationship and identity, how to reclaim peace, and how to move from that reactive place into more of a peaceful state.
And to make it hit home a little bit, as Corynne is going through the information, I'm actually going to be using myself as an example so that we can kind of get a felt sense of what's going on.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah.
So this is just where I wanted to start. Dr. Hargrave teaches about love, which is synonymous with identity. We learn who we are through those early relationships, right? By the way that we're loved, it forms our identity. And then trustworthiness, which creates a sense of safety. And this is true for every human being on the planet. Everyone needs this. And what happens in relationship is if these two things aren't in place, it creates a lot of pain, a lot of wounding. And so for us to feel loved, we need to feel like we're unique, we're worthy, that we're not alone. And then for trustworthiness, that sense of safety comes through predictability, openness to feedback, right? And fairness. And as everyone on this call knows, when those two things are not present in a relationship, it creates a whole lot of wounding, a lack of unsafety, and wounding around our identity of like, am I really lovable? Am I really valued in this relationship? So everything we talk about today, I want you to conceptualize it through this framework of love and trustworthiness.
Yeah, that's really important too, because I think as you as practitioners know, and all of the clients that I encounter, there's a family of origin wound, right?
Yes.
For better or worse, we tend to, in some way, marry our parents, right? Because we marry what feels like home. And even if home was hurtful, that's
Yeah.
who we tend to marry. And so, I mean, every single one of my clients and everybody in this community comes with a family of origin wounding that we don't often consciously realize until we're faced with being entangled with a narcissistic partner.
Absolutely. Yeah. And here's just a couple examples of how that can show up in relationship, either family of origin or romantic relationship, even in work scenarios as well. And friendships, is those violations of love and trust can show up as like gaslighting, defensiveness, making you feel like you're the problem, right? Instead of taking ownership, infidelity, all kinds of emotional abuse, coercive control, anger outbursts. And what happens is that when we experience those as survivors, it creates injuries. It causes us to move from a place of peace into fight or flight. And what we're going to uncover today is how do we, on our side of the fence, make sure that we don't stay in that place of fight or flight and feel stuck based on the wounds that we've experienced from our abusive partner, but how do we move towards a place of empowerment and peace so that that doesn't have a stronghold over our lives? So I'm going to show a little bit of that, and then Cameron's going to share what this looks like in his own story. So here, this is not exhaustive, but here are just some basic things that most people feel when there's violations of love and trust. So they might feel, let's say that your partner has anger outbursts, or questions everything you say. You might feel unsafe or insecure. Perhaps they're constantly turning to pornography or other partners instead of remaining faithful in the relationship, and it causes you to feel unloved or unworthy. So just take a second and look at this list and see if any of these things kind of ring true for you. And then Cameron's going to go ahead and share from this list what he feels like are violations of love that he experienced in his life, love and trust.
Yeah, and those of us who are live with us today, if you want to put anything in the chat about, you know, how this relates to you, we welcome that. It will not be visible in the recording.
Yeah. So thinking about those painful things, those wounds, those violations of love and trust, every human being has developed a way of coping with those violations. And this is the typical ways that people do that. So looking at violations of love, feeling like it impacts your identity. I'm not valuable. I don't belong. Some people get really angry. Other people shame themselves, neglect themselves, get really anxious. When we don't feel a sense of safety and trust in a relationship, some people try to control, work harder, be perfect, and other people try to escape and numb out and withdraw. And so just taking a second to look at that list and ask yourself, when I'm feeling those violations of love and trust, what is it that I do from a reactive place? How do I respond out of pain? Did you want to go ahead and jump in?
Yeah. So I think what I'm going to talk about today is more family origin stuff. So I think in my family of origin, from my caregivers, I kind of had a bit of both. I had some violations of love and some violations of trust. And I think that the violations of love kind of came from a caregiver, one caregiver in particular that I think themselves had a lot of shame. And I think that their shame, they didn't feel like they were good enough. I think in that a lot of things kind of became about them to a pretty honestly severe standpoint. And in that, I didn't really like fully exist as I would say a child should. And I do believe that this individual, did not intend to interact with me and I have my brother this way, but I think that their own pain caused their own coping mechanisms. So I think that for me, my coping mechanisms kind of played out in phases. So when I was younger, I felt, the pain of being parented by this parent in particular manifested in me not really feeling like I was good enough. So when I was really young, I was actually a really good athlete. And I found out that I could get what at that time I thought was love, the kind of love that I thought I needed by being really good at sports. And so I kind of made it up in multiple different sports pretty high. And then in high school, I snapped both of my hips within 6 months. So that cosmic situation kind of caused me to have to feel my pain. And then the second shift hit where I started to move to getting really angry and kind of more the blame. So yeah, that's kind of how it played out in me. I don't know if we got any comments, if anybody has anything at this point, but we can keep moving on if not.
And I'll just say for me, something Cameron and I share is I have always felt in the area of love that I wasn't good enough. And I think that comes from the performance culture I was raised in. And I have always gone into shame, feeling like it's all my fault. If I just were better, then people would show up for me. That shows up anxiety, that shows up in people pleasing and not speaking up when I need to. And so that's part of my pain journey and how that shows up in my life.
And one thing just to say before we move on is that our pain cycles, our pain speaks to each other.
Yes.
And we'll see that more as we move on in the presentation.
Yeah. And I just want to note too, that something that you said, Corynne, I'm not good enough, right? Or if I could just do better, I would earn love. A consistent thing that, we hear from clients is that, when they're entangled with an emotionally abusive partner who cannot hear them or meet their needs or is not interested in it, that they get stuck in this cycle of, if I just said it the right way, they could hear me. Maybe I'm not saying it right. Or next time, if I say it just perfectly, right? If I use the exact right words, if I express myself perfectly in just the right way, I'll be heard this time. So then you start to shift that blame inside, and it's all your fault. The abuse that you're experiencing is your fault. You're just not good enough. You're not articulating it correctly, right? And that's what keeps so many people trapped in these abusive relationships for so long, because they take on the self-blame of, I'm not communicating it just right.
Yeah. Or if I had just, had the house perfectly clean and kept the kids quiet, then they wouldn't have raged at me last night. Or like that, like I just have to work harder, stay on eggshells and make it better. And then they won't treat me this way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that just keeps you stuck in a state of hypervigilance, of feeling like your abusive partner is speaking into your sense of identity and safety. And we all know that doesn't work long term. That they're not going to show up in such a way. I mean, no one can, to inform your sense of identity and safety as an adult. That's something that people will always let you down, but especially magnified in abusive relationships, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that, to speak to that as well, for me, my process took 15 years of trying to earn that love through performance. And what was confusing is I would get accolades, but it wasn't the type of love that I really needed as a child to feel supported and seen. So that part can keep you kind of stuck in it. That you do get some things sometimes, but it's not always what really fills.
So I just want to encourage y'all, if you do have a piece of paper, this is an example of a pain cycle, is to write down, and I just scratched this out, of like, what are those primary emotions that I feel? Those are listed at the top. What are the reactive ways that I have learned to cope with my pain? And just build some mindfulness and awareness of what is that cycle I get stuck in. Just real quick, like I said, we all have pain cycles. There's no human being on this planet who doesn't have pain and react out of that pain in ways that keep them hypervigilant, on edge, reactive. And often what happens is, kind of speaking to what Kat said, is that we have those primary injuries from childhood. That scab, so to speak, gets picked at in our adult relationships. Sometimes even new wounding occurs. And those ways that we react out of pain, whether that's becoming anxious, working harder, numbing out, those become automatic behaviors that, if we don't practice mindfulness and awareness of, we'll get stuck in that cyclical pattern of reacting when pain comes up. And it doesn't happen in our awareness unless we practice mindfulness around it. It just kind of plays out and picks up its own speed and takes off with it. So it's something to take time to kind of think through, what are those primary injuries for me, and then how does that show up in reactive behaviors in my own life?
And just one thing real quick to say about the pain cycle. The pieces of the pain cycle came to us without a choice. So when we went through these situations and we were left with this feeling about who we are, or whether or not we're safe in the world, the coping mechanisms that were selected were our nervous system's best attempt to try and protect us in that moment. But that those coping mechanisms brought forward into life in friendships and romantic relationships don't really work as well, and can actually hurt us and keep us stuck. And it's all principles of neuroscience on how this happens. And it's almost like our pain cycle can be stamped on our brain. And luckily, due to a principle called neuroplasticity, which is basically the idea that your brain can heal and change at all points in life, we can kind of bring healing to that map of our brain that's our pain cycle.
Yeah, and have freedom to like not feel like you always shut down, or you have to live in anxiety, or no solution, that you can feel freedom to do something different that's peaceful for you, even if the other person's behavior doesn't change.
That's it for this group, right? We have no control over what the abusive co-parent does. We just need to work to find peace within ourselves and heal. Yeah.
And abusers often don't change because they don't self-reflect or practice this mindfulness that we're talking about. And they often perceive that it's always the other person's fault. And so they're not going to look at their own pain cycle likely and say, oh, wow, I realize that I feel insecure and that I try to control other people in my life. So we can't wait for them to change. We have to be empowered on our side of the fence to find peace and not get stuck in that cycle. So just some things for y'all to think of after this meeting is like, what areas have been violated for you? Is it love, identity, or safety and trustworthiness? What are those emotions from that list that are really core wounds for you? And what ways has your brain learned to cope with that have kept you stuck as an adult? I will send these to Kat so she can send them out to y'all as well. But here's the list of emotions, and here's the list of reactions. So now that we understand that, I would love for you all to map your own pain cycle in your own time. It's really helpful to have it written down to look at it and reflect on it. But let's move into the trap of this all and then how to get out of it. So like I said, abusers, or what Dr. Ramani refers to as that antagonistic personality style, they know what your soft points are and they'll intentionally poke at them to feel in control of you, to provoke a reaction. And they lack empathy and self-reflection of like how they're hurting you. So again, we can't wait for them to change. And then what I often see in my work with survivors is that when they're in their pain cycle and they react out of pain, that antagonistic abuser will focus on their reaction, that second part of that cycle, and completely ignore the pain underneath it or their part in the dynamic, what they did to cause that pain, right? And so if we get stuck in that pain cycle, what happens is they're just going to say, oh, see, you really are the problem because you got angry, or you completely checked out, whatever it is in your own personal pain cycle. So that's why self-regulation and empowerment is key, is because we can get stuck and it just causes you to feel more out of control and reactive over time.
What a perfectly horrible way to avoid accountability.
Yes.
Yes. My goodness.
Right. And we know in psychology that if you won't take accountability, and if you won't practice this, then you're not likely to change, right? So
yeah, and it can be that it's almost like accountability is intolerable. And that intolerableness is very difficult to access. So that's one of the reasons why it can be hard to get progress from our standpoint as professionals working with someone who's stuck in a cycle that's that entrenched, that they almost can't tolerate the work that needs to be done to get out of it. And it's almost below their access in a sense. So
so something that is going to be regulating for all of us is identifying the truth about who we are. And Cameron will share what those are for him. But thinking about taking charge over your identity and sense of safety and saying, it is no longer in my abuser's hands to define me and tell me how worthy I am, or to create this sense of safety for me. I'm going to reclaim this for myself and speak truth over myself and learn to self-regulate so I don't have to stay stuck in this pattern. And if you get stuck in this area, so for me, the not good enough, that goes way back. I can remember being 3 and feeling not good enough. I had an undiagnosed learning disorder that like caused me to perpetually feel like I could just never measure up. Something that you can do is think about someone you love. So a friend, a child, if they were to say to you, Mommy, I'm not good enough, what would you speak over them? Would you say, yeah, unless you're perfect, you'll never be good enough? Absolutely not. So a good starting point is to think about someone you love. If you're able to come up with those truths for yourself as an adult now, that's great. But sometimes going back a little bit is helpful too. Cam, would you want to share what those are for you?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with the beginning and then kind of move through to the truth. So again, originally for me, it was this feeling of me not being good enough, not being lovable. And I performed to try and gain love. It worked a little bit, and then it broke. I got angry. And then it kind of fed that pain cycle. Then that whole process made me actually further feel not good enough. But through various different situations, various different, I had a mentor, and just some of my own personal work, the not good enough kind of became, maybe I don't need to perform to be lovable. Maybe I can show people my vulnerability, how I feel insecure, and them being there with me. And when I share kind of the weaker parts, and then I get someone present with me and connecting with me in that, it made me feel like, well, if they can be with me in this place, then maybe my essence is good. Maybe even in my worst parts, in my brokenness, I am lovable. And just a repetition of that, again, principles of neuroscience, repetition is one of the foundations of neuroplasticity, that when we do things over and over again, that's when our brain changes. I started actually kind of feeling like maybe I am lovable. And then it kind of culminated in almost this spiritual experience where like, it was almost like I just had this profound feeling of that I am innately lovable. And it's like I believed it. And for me, because of kind of it was entrenched in my primary caregiver, this took years and years and years of work. And it was, I would make some progress, and then I would kind of go back to this relationship that wasn't super great to me, and then I would kind of feel not good enough again. But at each step of the way, I kind of got a little better. And then again, like I said, there was this big moment. And then I met this beautiful lady, and the rest is history. And we have 3 kids and a beautiful life together. But just one thing I want to say. So my truth is that I don't need to perform to be loved, that I can actually show people that I trust, that are safe, my brokenness, and that they won't punish me or hurt me in that, and they will be there with me in that, and ideally they will share theirs as well.
Yeah. And for me, I had, through my own therapy, a visualization of like little 3rd grade me having like a panic attack in classroom, feeling like so not good enough, not lovable. And I visualized myself walking into that room and getting down on her level and telling her what I would tell my kids, which is, you don't have to be perfect to be good enough. You are loved for who you are, not for what you do or how you perform or what you achieve. And I have that mental image that I pull from in moments where shame kicks in and I feel anxiety and I feel pressure of like, it doesn't matter what feedback is happening or how someone treats me, or moments when we're in an argument, like I know the truth about myself, and that can regulate me in that moment. And so kind of speaking to what Cameron was starting to talk about, is that the truth regulates that nervous system, especially if you can speak it out loud. It shifts what's going on in your brain from reactivity into more of like a cognitive place, and it empowers you to choose a more peaceful action. So I don't have to, along with Cameron, prove myself and work myself to a grind. I can show up with my gifts. I can say yes to the things I want to do. I can say no to the things that are not going to be life-giving for our family. And my worth doesn't depend on performance, right? I can know someone's angry and upset with me and not let that tear down my sense of identity. I can meet them with peace and say, hey, I can own my side of the fence, but I'm not going to allow you to jump over the fence and tell me about who I am and my worth. And I can also be responsive to own my part and also hold a boundary and say, nope, that doesn't belong to me. Anything else you'd add from the actions that come out of your truth?
I think, again, the big thing for me is that because I'm loved, I can be vulnerable, I can be courageous. And then it almost took away the power to be hurt, because it was an action that I was choosing. And then I found out, well, maybe it's not my fault that vulnerability didn't go well. Maybe that person wasn't safe. And that was like a revolution. But yeah, the action of vulnerability, the action of choosing to be kind, of being gentle, were really helpful to me.
Yeah. And so what that looks like is, oh, sorry, Kat, did you want to jump in?
Well, goodness, I'm getting so much from what you're saying. And, this space and this ecosystem that I work in, this is not only for the parents, but the kids, right?
Yes.
And like that shame piece, I think we all know that, if you put shame in a petri dish and in a different petri dish, you put love and acceptance and good enough, right? In that shame petri dish, like narcissism is just going to flourish. It's going to be overflowing.
Yeah, it's the essence of it almost. Yeah.
Exactly. And for the clients that I work with, it takes a while to get to that root fear. The root fear is my child is going to fall for someone like the narcissist or become the narcissist. Like that's what sits at the very bottom for everyone, that terror that one of those two things is going to come true.
Yeah.
And I think what's so lovely about this is this framework, kids are really smart. They get things way faster than grownups, And I think that we can do this work with our children to help them, to really just like wash away that shame, because why kids have trouble apologizing when they do something that hurts someone, because I think they feel like if I apologize, that means I was wrong, which means I'm bad.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And so, this is work that I've done with my own son. No, like what we get when we apologize and we take accountability is we admit that it's okay to make mistakes and that we're still lovable, even if we make a mistake. And that what we get to do with that action is connect with the person that we hurt, whether we meant to or not. And that just like washes that shame away. And so I'm just trying to think of like, how do we apply this not only to ourselves, but our children, so we can break that trauma cycle and that abuse cycle for our kids.
And it's funny that you say that, because I, every day when I'm taking my kids to school, before they get out of the car, I speak my 3 truths over them. And I tell them, you are good enough. And they say, even if I'm not perfect, because they know the spiel at this point, you are lovable and you are precious to your mommy and daddy. And from that place of peace and of truth, it empowers them to take responsibility for their choices, to not become people pleasers. And I'm hoping, knock on wood, that seeps in, but also like modeling for them, me choosing my truth, so that they see me choosing, you know what, I made a mistake today and I'm really struggling, but I know that this mistake doesn't define my worth. And having them see Cameron and I do that to further implement that into their identity too. And their sense of safety by us showing up in a way that like we can own our part. What I love is Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson in their book, The Power of Showing Up, they talk about how it only takes one parent, or a loving, safe adult, not even a parent, to show up for a kid, for them to develop that secure attachment and all the benefits of it. We won't geek out about it today, but I want to empower everyone on this call that if you were the only adult showing up for those kids, that is enough. And so hopefully that is encouraging to y'all on this call today too.
And just one other thing I want to say is that if you do see some things in your child that are concerning because of the pain that they're in, it's never, ever too late for a child to heal from this. And, I think that hope is really important, and because it could be so difficult to kind of watch your child be a bystander in this. That was my story. But again, because of the beautiful principles of neuroplasticity that we won't geek out about right now, it's never too late. And the brain can always heal. They can always find new ways of interacting. They can heal those wounds of identity and those wounds of safety, and truly flourish and feel different and act different out of that feeling.
Yeah, thank you for that. And what I want to say to every parent on this call too is that I know you all feel so much guilt, right? Guilt about choosing the wrong partner, guilt about choosing to leave that abusive partner. You're taking on a lot of shame that's not yours, and you're taking on a lot of blame that's not yours. And I want you to remember that by choosing to demonstrate to them that you are worthy of kindness and love, you're modeling to your children that they are worthy of that as well. And your children will be so resourced, even in their teens and 20s, compared to most adults today, by modeling this work to them early. Like, what a gift that you're giving to your kids. It is the hardest of hard on hard days, but what a beautiful gift you're giving to your children. So I just want you to remember that, right? Hold on to that. Yeah.
And that can actually be one of the most healing things for the child.
To watch their parent choose that. And I just, one tangible way that showed up this week with me with a client is I have a client who would either get really angry and lash out, or she would just kind of shame herself and accept the emotional abuse and the verbal abuse and not speak up. And something she's been practicing is saying, the way you're speaking to me right now is disrespectful. I'm going to walk away. And showing her children, I don't have to scream back. I also don't have to stay silent and allow the abuse. I can hold a boundary and speak up for myself and walk away. And for her children to see that is so life-giving. And so I just want to encourage y'all, like, when you can get into this place of like, what is the truth about me? What is this peaceful action I want to choose? You break that pain cycle and say, I'm not engaging in this anymore. Again, the abuser is going to do what they're going to do, but I don't have to stay stuck because of their behavior.
Love that. You guys, I'm getting goosebumps. This is so powerful.
Well, there's just 4 steps I want to leave y'all with, and then we'll wrap up and I want to hear from you guys. The way that we can make this shift in our brain from our pain cycle to your peace cycle is these 4 steps. If you're able to say these out loud when you're in the car alone, or you're in the bathroom alone, or even in front of children, people that are safe in your life, as you repeat this process, you are doing what Cameron talked about. You are changing your brain. I believe Dr. Hargrave says it's about 90 repetitions for it to become a really wired network in your brain to be more accessible. But the first thing you're going to do is just say out loud, right now I'm feeling. What would that be for you typically, Cam, that shows up for you?
No, unlovable.
Unlovable. Normally when I feel this way, I
Perform or get angry.
The truth about me is
That I am lovable, that I'm courageous.
And instead I'm going to choose to
be vulnerable and kind and gentle.
Yeah. And so write those 4 steps down and you can practice them. Obviously, you're not going to say that in a moment of abuse to your partner or ex-partner. But if you can practice this on your own time, this will get more wired into your brain. And in that moment, you'll have more access to this 4th piece in a way that becomes secondhand nature. Just like initially our pain cycle is second nature because it's been practiced so many times throughout our lives, this new peaceful way of interacting can become second nature too with repetition.
And I just want to say that I want you to see these 4 steps as sacred, and that it's good to keep these to yourself if you're in a difficult relationship, because these steps can actually be used, can be weaponized against you.
Yeah. So this isn't something you're going to say in front of someone who's abusive. This is something you're going to practice on your own time.
Yeah.
The only thing they're going to see is this part right here.
Yeah.
And that might be like what I shared with the client of like, the way you're speaking to me right now is not appropriate. I'm going to step away.
Yeah. So that's all they get to see is the action that comes from your truth.
Again, we won't get into this, but the more you practice, the more wired into your brain it gets, the deeper that pathway gets, and the more freedom you'll find to not get stuck in that pain cycle.
I don't know. I think let's go back one. Let's go back one, because I think for me, the first sort of aha moment that I had that allowed me to give myself grace in my healing journey was to understand that my trauma responses and my reactions were my brain's attempt to keep myself safe. Right. And when I recognized, oh, these were unhealthy patterns that I developed in childhood to survive in my family of origin, but they are no longer serving me. And this is not my fault. This is almost out of my control. This is my brain and my body trying to keep myself safe. It just lifted this weight of responsibility and shame and like, why can't I stop doing this? Why am I doing this? What's wrong with me? All that negative self-talk went out the window. And when I started sort of ruminating like that, you were just talking about would I let my child talk to myself that way? The way I like to talk about it with my clients is, would you let your inner voice babysit your kids? Right. And
I love that. I'm going to steal that cat.
Yeah. And every time I hear that, and the way that I was able to first recognize it is my ex-husband still has free rent in my head. That is his voice still having free rent in my head, saying all the horrible things.
Yes.
And I don't want to hear that voice in my head. So how do I kick him out of my head, stop giving him free rent? And how do I reparent myself? And how do I hear a new voice? What is the voice I want to hear in my head? And how do I do that? And so when I really looked at the biology of this and understood what was happening in my brain, I was like, okay, got it. Not my fault. So I do think it would be helpful for this crew if you spent just a couple minutes talking about that and literally like neural pathways, rebuilding, changing that chuck wagon trail of we're not going to go down this route anymore. Now we're going to change the route and we're going to go this way. How does that happen? Talking about like that 90 repetitions. I think that would really help this crew get out of that stuck.
Yeah. And it might look like a visualization where you go back to yourself in the past and you speak truth to your younger self. With people with a faith background, often they'll bring in someone from their faith background to speak truth into them.
For me, like I said, for me, it was finding people that I could be vulnerable with, and just the nature of that relationship. There was a lot of truth telling and a lot of affirmation, and that the repetitions of interacting with them and sharing with them, kind of built that in my brain.
I also have loved, if you have a picture of yourself in that season of life where that wounding had, and you can look at that picture and have compassion for yourself. And there's something about looking at yourself, whether it's third grade you or 25-year-old you who's newly in love, who didn't know, and look at yourself and have compassion for your younger self and speak truth to your younger self. That's really powerful too.
Yeah. From a therapeutic standpoint, the way that this therapy plays out is that one of the more powerful moments is we actually ask the person to mentalize that child in the room with us, and really feel that that child is actually sitting next to them, and that now you as an adult, I want you to speak to that child in that moment of pain, what you would say. And that's kind of when the waterworks come out, and when they really get in touch with how as an adult they feel about that child and what they would have done. And so what Corynne is saying is that you can mirror that without a therapist, and really, really try and get in touch with visualizing you at that age when that one event happened that really felt like you weren't good enough. And that is playing on principles of neuroscience, of mindfulness, of imagination, all of that stuff. It's studied things that really can unlock our brain's ability to create new pathways.
Yeah, like the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined, right? So if you imagine that version of you that, you want to be, or that you are, in contrast to what you're told about yourself, right? And I feel like for a lot of my clients, this starts with, that voice in their head, that free rent. If you want to get to the truth of you, what we know about these abusers is they project like crazy, right? So if they're telling you you're not smart, chances are you're smart. That was just their projection, right? So to sort of flip this thing on its head, to flip that negative script on its head, write down all the things that you think about yourself that are not true, that are really causing you pain and shame and, tearing down your self-worth, or, keeping that free rent stuck in your head, that voice. Write those down, and you'll probably find that the truth is actually the opposite of all of those things, right?
100%.
Like the direct opposite of all of those things. So if you're having trouble creating the truth about yourself, because that negative voice is so ingrained in your head from your abuser, that's a really good place to start. What are all the horrible things that they used to say to you? Now, you're probably, if you can think about it, it's the exact opposite.
Totally. Yeah.
Alrighty. Go ahead.
Question time. Or like if people wanted to share later. So
I like the idea of the visualization. I like the idea of those 4 questions. You're giving us some really concrete strategies. How do I know? Because I think this is the challenge that a lot of people have. How do I know when I'm in a trauma cycle? When I'm like playing that out, like, what are the indicators that I can use to sort of snap me out of it? Go, oh, I'm doing it again, right? What are sort of those key indicators? I'm stuck in a trauma cycle. I'm ruminating. I'm in an unhealthy pattern. Here's how I need to start to get out of it.
Yeah. Do you want to go? Or you want to go?
I think that's a really good question. I think first thing I just want to say is it can be very, 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 very hard to know that you're in a trauma cycle, particularly if the feeling that is at the core of your trauma cycle is a familiar feeling to you, right? Like something that maybe you felt with your parents. So I would say that, again, being mindful of kind of the milieu, kind of the stew that you operate in life, and really being like critical of what that is, and just kind of asking questions about it is a good starting point.
Mhm.
I think that, again, when we're doing this work, the very first step is to kind of realize you're in pain.
Mhm.
And then kind of naming the nature of your pain, of speaking it out loud. And that can be difficult because that kind of causes you to go towards it, not away from it. I don't know if you'd add anything else to that.
Yeah, I would say when I was trained by Dr. Hargrave, he would say, like, have your pain cycle be present in the back of your mind at all times.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why I like actually pull out a piece of paper and write it down, or I have a picture of it in my phone so that you can know it so well that you're like, I know this.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is like that shadow side. I know it so well. I can notice when it pops up. I have certain like body sensations that clue me into that I'm in my pain. So that might be like that drop in my stomach feeling that I get when I messed up, or I can tell someone's not happy with me, or I will get like pain in my chest, that intensity of like, oh, I'm going into that anxiety, walking on eggshells place. So also, like, when you're mapping that pain cycle, what are the body sensations that come with it? Or do you notice that you're over explaining yourself, or
Yeah.
you're really hard to get ahead of something, and you just feel like you're not at rest, like there's this hypervigilance? Those are all clues that you're in your pain cycle.
And
Yeah.
I think it can be difficult, Kat, to get 100% what Corynne said is true. And if someone is even having a hard time getting to that point of mapping the pain cycle,
Mm.
I think just realizing that healthy relationships don't involve foundationally guessing
Mm-hmm.
your value,
Mm-hmm.
that there is no benefit to that, and that you have the right and you should feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
and that you don't need to earn it, that you don't need to manipulate the situation in order to get either of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, maybe, Kat, that's a good starting point, is like this. There's something not right here. You do deserve to be loved. You don't need to, like, you just need to show up as you are to be loved.
Yeah.
And then work back from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. And I want to geek out for a minute too, because I didn't realize you were certified in DIR floor time.
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
oh
I
my,
actually spent a very long time in that.
Long time.
Yes.
gosh, that's some good stuff. And doing DIR floor time with my son,
Uh-huh.
to me, opened up my healing journey. I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh man, I didn't realize that anger is in my jaw and my eyes, or anger is in my jaw and my chest.
Yeah.
Like fear is in my stomach.
Uh-huh.
Sadness is in my eyes. So
Yep.
like, I can't even tell you how transformative for me when his play therapist was like, here's a picture of a body and here's where these specific emotions live.
Yeah.
So teaching my son to pay really close attention to his body,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Because people in an abusive relationship, we just shut down, right? We start to just shut down. Half the time we can't even feel our body. We're just disconnected to prevent from feeling as terrible as we do. So that really brought me back into my body and myself, my son's therapeutic process and DIR floor time. And it was like amazing. And so I think, again, bringing it back to how do we help our children with this so they don't fall for an abuser or become like the abuser?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit, Cameron, and how we can help our kids sort of recognize when they're having a reaction, name those emotions, what we can do with that so that we can help them with those healthy cycles too?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I always love meeting people who know about DIR floor time, because it's one of those things that's so beautiful, but not a lot of people know about it. So I would say that, like, one of the best things we can do is how we support our child, and I think, just to connect with what you were saying, Kat, in children, and really in all of us, but you really see it in children, kind of the sensory processing system in our body, it can really store and really feed into our dysregulation, and our dysregulation, again, is what puts us in fight or flight. So with kids, they can get really dysregulated, and their brain kind of does this thing where they cannot calm themselves down.
Yeah.
And so when a kid gets dysregulated, we want to connect with them and calm their nervous system. And DIR floor time has been used with those who are neurodiverse a lot. So it can get a little bit more complicated on how we connect with them there. For example, some kids don't like being held. So there's other things we can do. But if your child nervous system and their sensory processing system doesn't really work that way, what we can do is we can, when they're sad or when they're angry or when they're throwing a fit, before we correct them, before we go to the parenting things that maybe we were taught, what we really want to do is try and connect with what they're feeling, try and connect with where they are. And from a neurological perspective, if we can really connect with where they are, it can actually re-engage the frontal, the front part of their brain, which is what's necessary for them to understand the consequences, for them to understand kind of what's going on. And then we can speak to them about the situation. So the best thing we can do with our kids, honestly, across pretty much all scenarios, is connect with them when they're struggling. That doesn't mean that we don't have to hold them accountable, but we always want to connect with them first before we do that. And then again, be mindful of their sensory processing system, because it could be that certain ways of connecting with them don't feel as good to them. And then we would need to modify, and there's things we can do to do that.
Yeah. We have a kiddo that if you give her a hug, she just melts into your arms and relaxes. And then we have another kiddo that if you give her a hug, she screams and gets more angry.
Yeah.
So you just know your kid and you know what is
Yeah.
calming to them and what soothes them first before you do the,
and to validate
moment.
And to validate the feeling.
Yeah.
To validate that feeling first so that they can be regulated. And honestly, a lot of times if you validate the feeling, that can protect them against these negative coping mechanisms.
Totally.
Yeah.
And from narcissistic abuse, because they know what they're feeling is valid. Now, do they need correction on how they handle that feeling? Absolutely. You can't hit your sister. However, it's okay to feel that way. And here's other choices for how you can respond.
And just one more thing I want to say. One of the best things we could do to protect our kids from getting in narcissistic cycles themselves is to teach them to tolerate their own negative feelings.
Yeah.
And you teach a kid to tolerate their negative feelings by connecting with them where they're at.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not trying to protect them from that pain, but helping them, sit in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More about that. Yeah.
I'll ask one more time. Any other questions, put them in the chat. But if not, I just thank you to both of you. This was just so lovely and healing. And I love all these concrete strategies you brought. I mean, for those who were live, I hope you took screenshots. If not, there's a recording of this event. And for those who are watching the recording, take screenshots, of the specific models that they shared. Really sit with this later. Do it with your kids, do it with your new partner, and thank you both. This was just lovely and transformative. For folks who are in Colorado, Corynne and Cameron are located in Colorado, and hopefully are accepting new clients, new patients. Fabulous. And to everyone else, the process of finding a therapist can be a long journey. I have some great recommendations all across the country. So if you're seeking a mental health professional and you would like a recommendation, please reach out. Just quickly, I want to say to join us on July 8th for our next Lunch and Learn with Coercive family court strategist and attorney Tracy B. for a strategy-packed session to support protective parents navigating the journey of self-representation in family court. So keep an eye out for that registration link. Navigating a high conflict divorce takes a village, and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you to all of you, and Corynne and Cameron. We'll see you next time.
Thank
you.
you.